Romantic billionaire asks caretaker father for a kiss. He says no, until her shocking deal today. The grandfather clock in the Mel Brock Hotel's marble lobby struck 11:47 p.m. on December 31st, and Celeste Davenport stood alone by the floor-to-ceiling windows, watching snow fall over Manhattan. At 24, she owned this empire, 37 floors of luxury, a penthouse suite that cost more than most homes, and a loneliness so profound it echoed through every empty room of her life. The lobby itself was a masterpiece of design, the kind of space that made architects weep and photographers beg for permits. Italian Carrara marble stretched across the floor in sweeping patterns, veined with gold that caught the light from 3 massive crystal chandeliers overhead. Each chandelier had cost more than a luxury car, imported from Austria, assembled by craftsmen who'd trained for decades. The walls were paneled in dark mahogany, with brass fixtures that Ryan polished every night until they gleamed like new pennies. Art Deco flourishes gave the space a timeless elegance. This could have been 1925 or 2025, and it would have looked equally magnificent. But tonight, with the lobby empty of guests, all of them either out celebrating or tucked away in their rooms, the beauty felt hollow, like a museum after closing time. Beautiful, but dead. Celeste wore her signature royal blue blazer over denim shorts despite the winter cold, her blonde hair falling in waves over her shoulders, blue eyes reflecting the city lights below. The outfit was ridiculous for the season, completely impractical, the kind of thing that made the doorman exchange glances when she passed. But it was the last thing her father had complimented before he died 3 years ago. She couldn't let it go. The blazer had been a gift for her 21st birthday, custom-tailored in Milan by a designer whose waiting list was 2 years long. Thomas Davenport had pulled strings to jump the line as he always did. Royal blue because he said it matched her eyes. Silver buttons because a Davenport doesn't do brass. The shorts were from a beach vacation in the Hamptons, the last summer they'd spent together before his illness took over. They'd walked the beach every morning, him growing thinner by the day, her pretending not to notice. On the last day he'd said, "You look like your mother in those, happy, free, don't lose that, Celeste, don't let this life make you hard." She'd lost it anyway. The hardness had crept in slowly, like frost forming on a window. First the business school competitiveness, then the corporate ruthlessness, then the divorce that had taught her to trust no one. Now here she was, 24 going on 60, wearing her dead father's compliment like armor against a world that only wanted her money. Through the glass she watched a figure cross the hotel's courtyard on a blue Harley-Davidson motorcycle. Even from 5 stories up, even in the falling snow, she knew who it was. Ryan Walker, 28 years old, the night janitor who arrived every evening at 11:30 p.m. and left at 7:01 a.m., keeping the Mel Brock's marble floors spotless while the wealthy slept. She'd been watching him for 6 months now, not in any predatory way, at least that's what she told herself, but with a fascination she couldn't name. There was something about the way he moved, the quiet dignity in how he pushed his cleaning cart, the focused intensity when he polished brass railings until they gleamed. He never rushed, never complained, never asked for anything, and he never ever looked at her the way other men did. Most men saw her and saw dollar signs. They saw the Davenport empire, the inheritance, the access to wealth and power. They smiled too broadly, laughed too loudly at her jokes, agreed with everything she said. They were shadows of men, empty reflections of what they thought she wanted. But Ryan Walker looked at her, on the rare occasions when he did look at her, with something else. Something that felt uncomfortably like pity. The elevator chimed. Celeste turned to see Ryan step into the lobby, pulling off his yellow work gloves and tucking them into his blue uniform pocket. He was tall, lean, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar and eyes the color of storm clouds. He had 3 days of stubble and hands that looked equally comfortable handling a mop or rebuilding a motorcycle engine. There was a small scar above his left eyebrow, a thin white line that made her wonder about its origin. A childhood accident? A fight? She'd spent 6 months wondering and had never found the courage to ask. He moved with an economy of motion that she found mesmerizing. No wasted energy, no unnecessary flourishes, just purpose and precision. She'd watched him work enough to know his routine by heart. He'd start on the 3rd floor, work his way down. He'd polish the brass first, then vacuum the carpets, then mop the marble. He had a specific pattern he followed, overlapping strokes that ensured no spot was missed. He'd hum while he worked, blues songs mostly, B.B. King, Muddy Waters, Sometimes Etta James. Old school music that felt out of place coming from a 28-year-old but somehow fit him perfectly. She'd tried not to watch, tried to tell herself it was inappropriate, that she was objectifying him, that there was a power dynamic at play that made her attention problematic, but she couldn't help it. There was something magnetic about him, something real in a world of artifice. "Good evening, Ms. Davenport," he said quietly, nodding once before heading toward the supply closet. His voice was deeper than she'd expected the first time she'd heard it, gravelly, like he'd spent years smoking, though she'd never seen him with a cigarette. Later, she'd learn it was from a childhood injury, vocal cords damaged in an accident. The scar above his eyebrow was from the same incident. "Ryan," she called out, her voice echoing in the empty lobby. The acoustics in here were strange, designed to absorb noise when crowded but amplifying it when empty. Her voice sounded desperate to her own ears, needy. She hated it. He paused mid-step but didn't turn around. His shoulders tensed slightly, a tell she'd learned to read. He was uncomfortable. "Is there a problem with the cleaning? I can address it immediately. Always so formal, always so professional. Never just hey or what's up or any of the casual shortcuts normal people used. Always Ms. Davenport, never Celeste. Always, I can address it immediately instead of what's wrong." It was a wall he'd built and she understood why. He needed that distance. That formality was his protection. "No, everything is—" She laughed, a sound brittle as breaking glass. The laugh echoed, bouncing off marble and mahogany, coming back to mock her. "Everything is perfect. As always, it's New Year's Eve. Shouldn't you be somewhere? With someone?" Now he did turn, those gray eyes studying her with an expression she couldn't read. "I could ask you the same question, Ms. Davenport. Shouldn't the owner of the Melbrook be at some exclusive party right now? Not standing alone in an empty lobby talking to the janitor?" The words weren't cruel, but they landed like punches. She felt her face flush. "I prefer my own company." "Then we have that in common." He turned back toward the supply closet. "I'm cooking dinner," she blurted out. "In my penthouse, traditional American New Year's dishes. Black-eyed peas, collard greens, cornbread, roasted ham. My grandmother's recipes. There's way too much food for one person." Ryan's shoulders tensed. For a long moment, he stood perfectly still, his back to her. When he spoke, his voice was careful, controlled. "That's very kind, Ms. Davenport, but I have work to do. The lobby needs to be stripped and waxed before morning." "The lobby can wait. I'm the owner. I'm giving you the night off." "With respect, ma'am, I don't take handouts." He started walking again. "It's not a handout." Her voice cracked, desperation seeping through her carefully maintained composure. It's just dinner. Between two people who are both alone on New Year's Eve. Please." He stopped at the supply closet door, his hand on the handle. She could see the tension in his shoulders, the war being waged behind those storm cloud eyes. Finally, he turned to face her fully. "Why?" he asked simply. "Why what? Why does the CEO of a billion-dollar hotel empire want to have dinner with a janitor? What's the angle? What do you want from me, Ms. Davenport?" The question shouldn't have hurt, but it did, because he was right to ask it. In his world, in the world he inhabited, people like her didn't do kind things without expecting something in return. She'd learned that lesson herself, but from the opposite side. Her ex-husband had married her for the hotel, Marcus Sterling, Wall Street golden boy, with his perfect smile and perfectly empty heart. He'd courted her for 8 months, proposed with a 4-carat diamond, promised her forever. The marriage lasted 14 months. 13 of those months he'd been sleeping with his secretary. When she filed for divorce, he'd had the audacity to ask for alimony. Her so-called friends had befriended her for access to wealth. Madison and Tiffany, and all the other trust fund socialites who air-kissed her cheeks and stabbed her in the back. Everyone wanted something. But what did she want from Ryan Walker? The truth was too complicated, too tangled with feelings she didn't understand and couldn't name. So she said the only thing that felt safe, "Because I'm tired of being alone, and you look like you might understand what that feels like." Something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe, or recognition. He studied her for a long moment, and she felt exposed under that gaze, as if he could see straight through her designer clothes and perfect makeup to the hollow ache beneath. 1 hour, he said finally. "I'll have dinner with you for 1 hour. Then I have to get back to work." "Deal." She smiled, the first genuine smile she'd felt in weeks. "Penthouse level. Take the private elevator. I'll meet you there in 30 minutes. He nodded once and disappeared into the supply closet. Celeste stood alone in the lobby, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it echoing off the marble floors. What was she doing? This was insane. Inappropriate. He worked for her, for God's sake. But she couldn't seem to care about any of that. For the first time in 3 years since her father died and left her this golden cage, she felt something other than numbness. She felt alive. 37 minutes later, she'd changed her outfit twice before settling on the blue blazer and shorts again, then spent 5 minutes fixing her makeup, then another 3 convincing herself this wasn't completely insane. Celeste heard the elevator chime in her penthouse. Her hands were shaking as she pulled the roasted ham from the oven, the smell of brown sugar glaze and cloves filling the massive kitchen. The kitchen itself was a monument to excess. Sub-zero refrigerator large enough to walk into, wolf range with 8 burners and a griddle that had never been used, marble countertops from Carrara imported at obscene cost, custom cabinetry and dark walnut that had been hand-carved by artisans in North Carolina. Her father had insisted on the best of everything. A kitchen makes a home, he'd said, standing in this very spot 3 weeks before he died, his body ravaged by pancreatic cancer, but his spirit still fighting. Even if you never cook in it, even if you order takeout every night, it's about what it represents, Celeste. Excellence, standards, never settling for less than the best. She'd thought he was talking about kitchen appliances. Now, standing here alone cooking her grandmother's recipes, she wondered if he'd been trying to tell her something else entirely, about choosing quality over convenience, about doing the work yourself instead of delegating everything, about finding value in tradition and ritual, and the simple act of creating something with your own hands. The meal she'd prepared was ambitious for someone who rarely cooked. Black-eyed peas simmered with ham hock, onions, and a bay leaf, Southern tradition for luck in the new year. Collard greens cooked low and slow with bacon and vinegar, bitter and rich. Cornbread from scratch, her grandmother's recipe that required buttermilk in a cast-iron skillet heated until it smoked. The ham was a masterpiece she'd spent hours on, scored in a diamond pattern, studded with cloves, glazed with brown sugar, orange juice, and Dijon mustard, basted every 20 minutes until the skin was caramelized and crackling. Ryan stepped out of the elevator and she noticed immediately that he'd changed. Instead of his blue work uniform, he wore dark jeans and a simple gray Henley shirt that fit him just well enough to remind her that beneath the janitor's uniform was a man who worked with his hands and took care of his body. His hair was damp, like he'd showered in the hotel's employee facilities. He'd shaved too, though he'd left a light stubble that gave him a rugged edge. She caught the scent of soap, something simple and clean. Drugstore brand, probably, nothing fancy. It was perfect. You didn't have to change, she said, setting the ham on the granite countertop. But I'm glad you did. Seemed disrespectful to show up in my work clothes. He took in the penthouse with a sweep of his eyes, the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park, the modern furniture that cost more than he probably made in a year, the abstract paintings on the walls. 1 Rothko, 2 Pollocks, a Basquiat her father had bought as an investment that had quintupled in value. This is impressive. It's lonely, she said before she could stop herself. The words just came out, bypassing every filter and wall she'd carefully constructed. I rattle around in here like a ghost. My father designed it as the ultimate luxury apartment. 14,000 square feet, 5 bedrooms, 7 bathrooms, 3 living areas, a library I never use, a home gym that's become a very expensive coat rack, and I use maybe 3 rooms total. Kitchen, bedroom, and the study where I pretend to work before giving up and doom-scrolling through news articles about how millennials are ruining everything. Ryan's lips twitched, almost a smile. Including the hotel industry? Especially the hotel industry, she said, returning the almost smile. Apparently we want experiences, not things. We want authenticity. We'd rather spend money on avocado toast than save for retirement. Are you eating a lot of avocado toast up here in your 14,000 square foot apartment? Tons of it, she deadpanned. I have an avocado guy. He comes twice a week. Very authentic. That got a real laugh from him. A deep, warm sound that transformed his face. For just a moment, the walls came down and she saw the man beneath the armor. The man who could find humor in the absurdity of their situation. The man who might possibly be feeling the same strange pull she was. Why do you stay? He asked, the laughter fading back into seriousness. The question was direct, honest, and it caught her off guard. Because it's mine. Because he left it to me. Because, she paused, struggling for words that wouldn't sound pathetic. Because I don't know what else to do. I'm 24 years old and I'm already living like I'm winding down my life instead of starting it. This place is beautiful and impressive, and it's killing me slowly. But leaving would feel like giving up, like admitting that I can't handle what he built, that I'm not strong enough to carry the Davenport legacy. Ryan walked to the windows, looking out at the city sprawling below them. The view was spectacular. Central Park stretched out like a dark canvas dotted with lights, the buildings beyond it reaching toward the sky, the streets far below teeming with people heading to parties and celebrations. I had a place once, nothing like this. Just a small apartment in Queens, 800 square feet. But it was mine. I chose every piece of furniture, painted every wall, fixed every broken thing myself. It felt more like home than all of this probably does. Had? She caught the past tense. Divorce, he said simply. She got the apartment. I got the Harley and my tools. Seemed like a fair trade at the time. So he understood loss too. Understood what it meant to have your life rearranged by forces beyond your control. Celeste felt something shift between them, some invisible wall starting to crack. Come on, she said, gesturing to the dining table she'd set by the windows. Let's eat before everything gets cold. She'd set the table carefully. Her grandmother's china that had survived 3 generations, silver flatware that had been a wedding gift from her father's first marriage, crystal glasses that caught the city lights and threw rainbows across the white tablecloth, fresh flowers in the center, white roses because they were elegant and neutral and didn't try too hard. Candles, though, she'd debated that for 10 minutes, worried it would seem too romantic, too presumptuous. In the end, she'd lit them anyway. The hell with presumptions. They sat across from each other, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, Celeste didn't feel the crushing weight of silence. They talked about small things at first. The weather, the hotel, the chaos of New Year's Eve in Manhattan. The forecast says we're getting another 8 inches tonight, Ryan said, taking a sip of the wine she'd poured. A simple red, nothing pretentious, nothing that screamed, "Look how rich I am. Roads will be a mess by morning." Do you worry about riding in weather like this? She asked, genuinely concerned. The Harley, I mean. On icy roads. I'm careful, and I've been riding for 16 years. I know how to read the road, how to feel when the bike's losing traction. It's actually quieter on nights like this. Most people stay home. Less traffic, fewer idiots texting while driving. He paused, considering. There's something meditative about it, just you and the machine and the road. Nothing else matters. That sounds lonely. Lonely and alone aren't the same thing, he said thoughtfully. Lonely is being surrounded by people who don't see you. Alone is choosing solitude. One hurts, the other heals. She absorbed that, recognizing the truth in it. How many parties had she attended where she was the center of attention but felt utterly invisible? How many conversations had she had that meant absolutely nothing? Which one are you? She asked softly. Lonely or alone? He met her eyes. Both, most nights. But tonight I'm neither. The admission hung between them, fragile and honest. Celeste felt something shift, some invisible barrier dissolving like sugar in hot water. Tell me about your favorite ride, she said. The best day you've ever had on that Harley. Ryan's face lit up, transforming from guarded to genuinely animated. Last August, I took 3 days off, first vacation in 2 years, and rode up to the Adirondacks. Left at dawn, took back roads the whole way. Stopped in these little towns that time forgot. Had breakfast at a diner in Saratoga Springs where the waitress knew everyone by name. Spent the night at a campground by a lake so clear you could see straight to the bottom. No phone service, no internet, just stars and water and the sound of the bike cooling down after a long ride. That sounds perfect. It was. I felt free, like I'd left all the weight behind. All the bills and responsibilities and disappointments. Just me and the road and the possibility that maybe life could be simple sometimes. I've never felt that, Celeste admitted. Free, I mean. Even as a kid, there were always expectations. Piano lessons and etiquette classes and summer programs designed to make me into the perfect Davenport heir. The closest I came was. She paused, a memory surfacing. Swimming in the ocean. Early morning before anyone else was awake. Just me and the waves and the sunrise. I remember that, Ryan said suddenly, his voice soft with memory. You used to sneak out at 6 a.m. I'd watch you from my window sometimes. You looked like you were trying to swim to another country. The memory clicked into place. The cottage next to the big house. A boy's face in the window. A wave of acknowledgement between 2 kids who understood that sometimes you needed to escape. But gradually, like ice melting, the conversation deepened into territory Neither of them had expected to explore on a first. Was this a date? Neither was sure. "Why do you work nights, she asked, spooning black-eyed peas onto her plate. The peas were perfect, cooked with ham hock and onions the way her grandmother had taught her mother, who had taught her. Tradition passed down through women who understood that food was love made visible. Pays better. Night differential adds 30% to the base rate, and I prefer the quiet. During the day, this place is chaos. Guests demanding things, managers micromanaging, everyone in a hurry. At night, it's just me in the building. I can think. I can work at my own pace. I can pretend for a few hours that I'm doing something that matters. Cleaning matters," she said firmly. "People don't appreciate it because they only notice when it's not done. But you make this place beautiful. You make it function. That's worth something." He looked at her with those storm cloud eyes, and she saw surprise there. Real surprise. Most people in your position wouldn't see it that way. "Most people in my position are assholes," she said bluntly, and was rewarded with a genuine laugh, a deep, warm sound that made her stomach flip. "Fair point," he conceded. He took a bite of ham, then nodded appreciatively. "This is good. Really good. Your grandmother taught you?" "She tried to. I was more interested in business school than cooking. Martha Stewart wasn't my role model, Warren Buffett was. But after my father died, I found her recipe box in the attic. It was like having a piece of her back, you know? She died when I was 16, but these recipes, they're her voice, her hands guiding mine. Every time I make her cornbread, I remember standing on a step stool in her kitchen learning to mix the batter just right. Not too much or it gets tough, just enough to bring it together." "That's beautiful," Ryan said quietly. "That's connection. That's what most people spend their whole lives looking for and never find. What about you?" She leaned forward, genuinely curious. "What connects you? What makes you feel like you're part of something bigger?" He was quiet for a long moment, his fork pausing halfway to his mouth. When he spoke, his voice was soft, almost reverent. "My Harley. I know that sounds stupid to someone who can buy any car she wants, but that motorcycle, I rebuilt it from nothing. Found it in a junkyard in Newark, just a rusted frame and broken dreams. The engine was seized, the tank had holes, the wheels were bent. Everyone said I was crazy to even try. Spent 2 years putting it back together, piece by piece, learning every bolt and wire and gear. Watched YouTube videos at 2 a.m. Read service manuals until my eyes crossed. Spent my weekends in auto salvage yards looking for parts. When I finally got it running, when I took it out on the open road for the first time, I felt free, like I'd created something permanent in a world that keeps falling apart. "It's blue," Celeste said suddenly. "Your Harley. It's blue." He looked at her surprised. "You noticed?" "I notice everything about you." The words were out before she could stop them, hanging in the air between them like a confession. She felt her face flush, but she didn't take it back. Couldn't take it back. "I noticed that you arrive at exactly 11:30 every night. Never early, never late. I noticed that you always start on the 3rd floor and work your way down. I noticed that you hum when you think no one's listening. Old blues songs, mostly B.B. King and Muddy Waters. I noticed that you stop to straighten paintings even though that's not your job. I noticed that you leave little sticky notes for the day staff when you spot maintenance issues. Always polite, always helpful. And I noticed that you ride a blue Harley-Davidson that you park in the same spot every single night, even though there are closer spaces available." Ryan set down his fork carefully, his expression unreadable. "Ms. Davenport." "Celeste," she interrupted. "Please, just Celeste." "Celeste," he said, and the way he spoke her name made her shiver. It was different from how other people said it, not performative, not calculating, just real. "What is this? What are we doing here?" "I don't know," she admitted. "I just know that I look forward to 11:30 p.m. every night. I know that I find excuses to walk through the lobby when you're working. I know that you're the only person in this entire building who treats me like a human being instead of a bank account. And I know that scares the hell out of me, but I don't want it to stop." He stood up abruptly, walking to the windows with his back to her. She could see his reflection in the glass, the tension in his shoulders, the war playing out across his features. The city lights illuminated his profile, and she was struck by how handsome he was. Not in the polished way of the men she usually dated, but in a rough, authentic way that made her heart race. "You don't know anything about me," he said quietly. "Then tell me. I want to know everything." "Why? So you can feel like you're doing charity work? So you can tell your rich friends that you're so progressive you had dinner with the janitor? so you can write a think piece about crossing class boundaries." The accusation stung, but she stood her ground, walking over to stand beside him at the window. Below them, people were streaming into Times Square, bundling against the cold, preparing for the ball drop. Thousands of people, all connected by this one shared moment, this one shared hope that midnight would bring something better. "Is that really what you think of me?" she asked softly. He turned to face her, and she was shocked to see pain in his eyes. Real, deep pain. "I think you're lonely and bored and looking for some excitement. I think in a week or a month you'll get tired of playing this game, and I'll go back to being invisible. And I can't," his voice cracked. "I can't afford to believe that someone like you could actually care about someone like me. Not again." "Again?" She reached for his hand, but he pulled away. "My ex-wife," he said bitterly. "Jennifer. She was a lawyer at one of those big firms downtown. Corporate litigation. Made 6 figures, worked 80-hour weeks, drove a BMW that cost more than my annual salary. We met at a coffee shop in Midtown. I was reading Steinbeck, The Grapes of Wrath, and she said she liked that I was reading real literature instead of scrolling through social media. Said she liked that I was authentic, that I worked with my hands, that I wasn't pretentious like the lawyers and bankers she usually dated. 6 months later, we were married. It was a small wedding, City Hall. Her parents didn't come. They made it very clear they thought she was throwing her life away. My mother was there, though, crying happy tears because she thought I'd found someone who could give me a better life. God, the irony of that. For a year, it was good. Or at least, I thought it was good. We had this tiny apartment in Queens. She'd come home late, exhausted from billable hours, and I'd have dinner waiting. Nothing fancy, I couldn't afford fancy, but I could cook. She said she loved that about me. The domesticity, the simplicity. Said it was refreshing after dealing with corporate sharks all day. Then she made senior associate. Got invited to firm parties. Started bringing me along. That's when I realized I wasn't a partner to her. I was a curiosity, an interesting story she could tell at cocktail parties. "Oh, Ryan fixes motorcycles, isn't that quaint? He's so blue-collar, so real. Like I was some kind of noble savage she'd rescued from poverty." The worst part was the way her colleagues would look at me, like they were trying to figure out the angle. What was I getting out of this? Because surely I must be getting something. Nobody marries down out of love, right? There has to be a transaction. Then came the firm partner's retirement party. Big event. Everyone who was anyone in corporate law. Jennifer spent weeks preparing, getting the perfect dress, the perfect shoes, styling her hair. She wanted everything to be perfect because this was her chance to make an impression, maybe make partner herself someday. Her boss, senior partner named Richard something, he'd had too much champagne, started making jokes. "How's your mechanic husband, Jennifer? Still covered in grease? Must be hard bringing home the bacon when your husband smells like motor oil." Everyone laughed. It was just a joke, right? Just harmless ribbing. But I saw her face, saw the shame, the way she couldn't look at me for the rest of the night, the way she introduced me as my husband instead of by name like my identity was something to be hidden. We drove home in silence. When we got to the apartment, she said, "I think this was a mistake. Us. This whole thing." 2 weeks later, she filed for divorce, said I was holding her back professionally, that she needed someone who could match her ambition, her drive, her station in life. The kicker? She offered me money, alimony, like she was paying me off for the inconvenience of having loved her. I turned it down, took my Harley and my tools and walked away. Some things you can't put a price on. Self-respect is one of them. Celeste felt tears stinging her eyes. "I'm so sorry. That's horrible." "It taught me something, though," Ryan said, his voice hardening. "It taught me that people like you, people with money, power, status, you don't see people like me as equals. Maybe you think you do. Maybe you even believe it. But when it comes down to it, when you have to choose between your world and someone who doesn't fit in it, you'll choose your world every time. Because the alternative is too uncomfortable, too complicated, too much work." "I'm not her," Celeste said firmly. "I'm not ashamed of who you are or what you do. How do I know that? How do I know this isn't just some fantasy for you? The powerful CEO and the humble janitor. It's like a bad romance novel. Reality doesn't work that way. When the fantasy wears off, when you realize that dating me means never flying first class, never staying at 5-star resorts, never impressing your friends, what then? Then we deal with it," she said, grabbing his hand before he could pull away again. His skin was warm, calloused from work. real in a way that made her previous relationships feel like playing house. I'm not asking for forever. I'm not asking for promises. I'm just asking for a chance, a real chance, to know you, to let you know me, to see if this thing between us is real or if I'm just crazy. He looked down at their joined hands and she saw his resolve wavering, saw the moment when his walls started to crumble. You're crazy, he said softly. Definitely crazy. So are you, she shot back. For even considering this, I must be. But he didn't let go of her hand. His thumb brushed across her knuckles, a gesture so small and so intimate it made her breath catch. They stood there in silence, the city lights twinkling below them, the sounds of celebration drifting up from the streets far below. Somewhere in the hotel, a champagne bottle popped. Somewhere in the city, couples were kissing, making resolutions they'd forget by February. But up here, in this moment, it was just the two of them, and the possibility of something real. The grandfather clock in the lobby far below them began to chime midnight, the sound echoing through the building's ventilation system, a ghost of time passing. Outside, fireworks started exploding over Central Park, painting the sky in brilliant colors, gold and silver, red and blue, cascading stars that bloomed and faded and bloomed again. It's midnight, Celeste whispered. New year, new beginning, Ryan said, and there was something in his voice. Hope, maybe, or fear, or some combination of both, that made her heart skip. Hello, my friend, she said softly, using the phrase her grandmother had always used when she needed to check in with someone she cared about. How was your day today? Is everything okay? He laughed, actually laughed at the absurdity of the question, given everything that had just passed between them. My day was unexpected, complicated, confusing as hell. I came to work thinking I'd mop floors and wax marble and go home alone like every other night. Instead, I'm standing in a billionaire's penthouse holding her hand, watching fireworks over Central Park, and wondering if I've lost my mind. Mine too, she admitted. I woke up this morning thinking I'd spend New Year's Eve alone with a bottle of champagne and regret. Instead, I'm here with you and I can't remember the last time I felt this. Alive. Can I ask you something? His voice was rough, uncertain. Anything. Why tonight? Why now? You've worked at this hotel for what, 6 months since you took over? We've passed each other in hallways 100 times. Why did you finally say something tonight? She considered lying, considered giving him some easy answer about New Year's resolutions or holiday sentiment. But if they were going to do this, whatever this was, it had to start with honesty. Because I'm tired of being afraid, she said simply. Because my father spent his entire life building this empire and it killed him. Literally killed him. The stress, the pressure, the constant need to prove himself, it ate him alive from the inside. And I realized I was doing the same thing, working 16-hour days, sleeping 4 hours a night, measuring my worth in quarterly profits and occupancy rates. I'm 24 years old and I feel like I'm 80. I'm exhausted and lonely and so fucking tired of pretending I have it all together. And then I see you every night doing work that most people dismiss as meaningless, and you do it with such dignity, such purpose. And I thought, if I can just talk to you, just connect with one real person, maybe I can remember what it feels like to be human. He was quiet for a long moment, processing. Then, I'm not sure I'm the right person for that kind of responsibility. I'm not asking you to fix me. I'm just asking you to be honest with me, to be real. Everything else in my life is performance art. Can you just be yourself? I can try. He squeezed her hand. But you should know, Celeste, that being myself includes being stubborn and proud and sometimes too honest for my own good. It includes knowing that I can't give you the life you're used to. It includes accepting that there will always be people who judge us, who see me as some kind of gold digger or you as some kind of slumming rich girl. Can you handle that? Can you handle people thinking you're with me for my money? I've been poor my whole life, he said with a shrug. People have been making assumptions about me based on my bank account since I was born. What's one more assumption? She stepped closer, close enough to see the flecks of blue in his gray eyes, close enough to smell the clean scent of soap and leather on his skin, close enough to count the individual stubble hairs on his jaw. Can I ask you something? You can ask. His voice was careful, guarded. Can I kiss you? The words came out as a whisper, vulnerable and raw. Just once, to see if this is real, to see if I'm imagining this connection or if you feel it too. For a moment she thought he would say yes. She saw the desire in his eyes, saw the way his gaze dropped to her lips, saw his hand tighten around hers. Tighten. His free hand came up almost involuntarily to cup her cheek. His thumb brushed her skin and she leaned into the touch, her eyes fluttering closed. And then, like a door slamming shut, she saw him pull back, saw the walls go back up. His hand dropped from her face and he stepped away, putting physical distance between them. "No," he said firmly. "No, Ms. Davenport, I can't." The rejection hit her like a physical blow, like someone had reached into her chest and squeezed her heart until it stopped beating. Why? Why not? Because I work for you? Because there's a power imbalance here that can't be ignored? Because if I kiss you, if I let myself believe that this could be real and then it falls apart, which it will, I'll lose everything. My job, my dignity, the little bit of stability I've managed to build. I can't afford that risk. I wouldn't fire you. I would never. You say that now, he interrupted, his voice harder than she'd ever heard it. But what happens when you realize that I can't give you the life you're used to? That I can't take you to fancy restaurants or buy you expensive gifts or take you on European vacations? That I'm just a guy who fixes motorcycles and cleans floors for a living? What happens when the fantasy crashes into reality and you realize that slumming it with the janitor loses its appeal after the third or fourth time you have to explain to your friends why you're dating the help? I don't care about any of that. You should. His voice was cold now, distant, a stranger's voice. Because I do. I care about the fact that you own this building and I mop its floors. I care about the fact that you're wearing a blazer that costs more than my monthly rent. I care about the fact that everyone in this hotel, everyone in your life, would see me as some kind of gold digger trying to sleep his way into money. I care about my pride even if you don't. Tears stung her eyes, but she blinked them back, refusing to let him see how deeply his words cut. So that's it? We just pretend tonight didn't happen? Go back to being strangers passing in hallways? We were never anything else, he said quietly, and those 4 words hurt more than anything he'd said before. I should go. Thank you for dinner. It was generous of you. He turned toward the elevator and something inside Celeste snapped. She couldn't let him walk away, couldn't let this end before it had even started. She'd spent 3 years playing it safe, being the perfect CEO, doing what was expected, keeping her emotions locked away. And where had it gotten her? Alone in a golden cage, slowly dying inside, watching life pass by through bulletproof windows. "Wait," she called out, her voice stronger now, steadier. "I have a proposition for you." Ryan paused at the elevator, his hand on the call button. "Ms. Davenport, please don't make this harder than it already is." 50%, she said clearly, her business voice kicking in, the voice she used in boardrooms and contract negotiations, the voice that had closed deals worth millions. 50% ownership of the Melbrook Hotel. I'll sign over half of everything, half the profits, half the decision-making power, half the assets, half the empire. Full partnership, equal stakes. In exchange for one thing. He turned slowly, his expression a mixture of confusion and disbelief. "What are you talking about? You said you can't kiss me because I'm your boss. Because there's a power imbalance. Because you work for me and that makes everything complicated and potentially exploitative. Fine. I'm removing that imbalance. Be my equal partner, not my employee. My equal. Split everything down the middle, 50-50. And then, if you still don't want to kiss me, at least it won't be because of money or power or any of that bullshit. It'll just be because you don't want me. And I can live with that. But I can't live with wondering if we could have had something real if the circumstances had been different." "You're insane," he breathed, staring at her like she'd sprouted a second head. "You can't just give away $500 million hotel because you want a kiss. Watch me." She walked to her desk, pulling out legal documents she'd had drawn up months ago, contingency plans for bringing in a partner, for expanding the business, for any number of scenarios her lawyers had prepared for in their infinite paranoia. She'd never imagined using them like this, never imagined that the partner she'd bring in would be a janitor she'd fallen for over 6 months of silent observation. "I can have my lawyers modify these documents and have them filed by tomorrow morning. Partnership agreement, 50-50 equity split, full voting rights, equal profit distribution. No strings attached except one. You give us a real chance. You let yourself believe just for a little while that maybe this could work, that maybe we could build something together that's bigger than our bank accounts or our job titles or what anyone else thinks." Ryan stared at the documents, then at her, and she saw something devastating in his eyes, something that looked like grief mixed with wonder, mixed with fear. "Why would you do this?" His voice was barely a whisper. "What if I take the partnership and walk away? What if I sell my shares to your competitors? What if I'm not who you think I am? What if I'm just a con artist who saw an opportunity and played you perfectly? Are you? She challenged, walking back to him with the documents in her hand. Are you going to do any of those things? No, he admitted immediately. But you don't know that for certain. You've known me for 6 months and we've probably spoken a grand total of 50 words to each other before tonight. Yes, I do know that, she said firmly. I know you, Ryan Walker. Maybe not your whole story yet, but I know your character. I see it in how you work, how you take pride in something most people dismiss as menial labor. I see it in how you rebuilt that Harley from nothing, creating something beautiful with your own hands instead of just buying one off a showroom floor. I see it in how you treated me tonight, with honesty and respect, even when it would have been easier to just tell me what I wanted to hear. You could have kissed me. You could have taken advantage of the situation, but you didn't. You drew a line based on principle even though it clearly hurt you to do it. That tells me everything I need to know. You're good. You're real. And I'm willing to bet everything I have that I'm right about you. He looked at the documents, his hands trembling slightly as he took them from her. She watched him flip through the pages, saw his eyes scanning the legal language, the clauses and conditions and carefully worded protections. This is real, he said, more to himself than to her. These are actual legal documents, partnership agreements, asset transfers, profit-sharing arrangements all ready to be executed pending minor modifications to include your name and details. My lawyers are on retainer 24/7. I can have them finalize everything by morning. You're really willing to do this. It wasn't a question. You're really willing to give me half of everything your father built. My father built this hotel on the backs of people like you, she said quietly. People who worked hard and asked for nothing and got paid far less than they were worth. He used to be different, used to be better, but the business changed him, made him hard, made him forget that buildings are just steel and concrete without the people who maintain them, who clean them, who make them run. So yes, I'm willing to do this, because it's what should have been done a long time ago, because you deserve it, because you really don't remember, do you? He interrupted, his voice hollow. Celeste felt ice run through her veins. Remember what? That Harley, he said slowly, setting the documents down on the nearby table. The blue one. It wasn't always mine. What do you mean? It belonged to your father, Celeste. Thomas Davenport. He gave it to me when I was 12 years old. Before he got sick. Before he became obsessed with building this empire. Before money became more important than people. He gave it to me as a promise. A promise that we'd always be friends no matter what. That the differences between our families didn't matter. That I'd always be welcome at the Davenport estate. That money and class couldn't touch what we had. The room tilted. The fireworks outside became distant, muted, like she was hearing them underwater. What? That's impossible. I don't know you. I've never... You did, he said, and now his voice was thick with emotion, years of pain bubbling to the surface. We were kids together. Summers in the Hamptons, your father's estate, the big white house on Ocean Road with the private beach and the tennis courts, and my mother's cottage next door. Well, next door is generous. We lived in the groundskeeper's cottage. My mother, Diane Walker, was your family's housekeeper. For 3 years you were 8, 9, 10, and I was 12, 13, 14. We were inseparable. Do you really not remember any of it? Memories flooded back, hazy and distant, like looking at old photographs that had been stored in a dusty attic for too long. A boy with dark hair and gray eyes, running through sprinklers on the lawn, building sandcastles on the private beach, sneaking cookies from the kitchen, laughing until their stomachs hurt. Late-night conversations about dreams and futures. A friendship that had felt eternal in the way only childhood friendships can. Ryan, she whispered, the name suddenly familiar in a way it hadn't been before, carrying weight and history and 1,000 forgotten moments. Ryan Walker, little Ryan from next door. Not so little anymore, he said with a sad smile that broke her heart. Your father sold that estate when you were 11. Sold it to a developer who tore down my mother's cottage and built condos. Luxury oceanfront condos that sold for $2 million each. We lost everything. My mother worked as your family's housekeeper for 8 years, you know. Until your father fired her because he needed to cut costs for his hotel expansion. Needed to streamline operations. We moved to the Bronx. Shared a 1-bedroom apartment with another family. Couldn't afford the Hamptons anymore. Couldn't afford much of anything. Celeste felt like the floor had been ripped out from under her, like she was falling through space with nothing to grab onto. I didn't know. He never told me. I asked about you, I remember asking, but he said you'd moved away for your mother's new job, that people drift apart, that I needed to focus on my studies and stop living in the past. He paid my mother to disappear, Ryan said quietly, each word landing like a hammer blow. Gave her $50,000 and made her sign a non-disclosure agreement. Told her she could take the money and leave quietly, or she could make a fuss and he'd make sure she never worked in New York again. She took it because we needed it. Because she had no choice. Because she had a 14-year-old son to raise and no other prospects. But she kept the Harley. Your father had given it to me 3 years earlier, and she refused to let him take it back. Stored it in a friend's garage all these years. When she died 2 years ago, cancer, couldn't afford good treatment. She left it to me in her will. Said it was proof that good people existed, even if they got lost sometimes. Oh my God. Celeste couldn't breathe, couldn't process. The room was spinning, and she had to grab the edge of the table to keep from falling. Ryan, I'm so sorry. I didn't. If I'd known, would it have mattered? He shook his head, and she saw tears in his eyes. The first real vulnerability he'd shown all night. You were a kid. You went to private schools, then boarding school in Connecticut, then Cornell. You became who you were supposed to become, the perfect Davenport heiress. And I became who I had to become, a guy who works 3 jobs to stay afloat, who fixes motorcycles in his spare time, who cleans floors because it pays the bills. 2 different paths, 2 different worlds. But we're here now, she said desperately, her own tears finally spilling over. We found each other again. After all these years, after everything that happened, we're standing in the same room. That has to mean something. It can't just be coincidence. It means that I'm the janitor in the hotel your father built on my mother's unpaid overtime, Ryan said bitterly. It means that you're the CEO who doesn't even remember the boy she used to build forts with. It means that the Harley your father gave me as a symbol of friendship, that promise that money didn't matter, is the only thing I have left from that time. It means that everything that was good got buried under money and power and all the things that don't actually matter, but somehow matter more than anything else in this world. Then let's fix it, Celeste pleaded, grabbing his arms, forcing him to look at her. Let's make it right. Take the partnership. Take half of everything. It's what your family deserved back then. It's what you deserve now. Let me make up for what my father did. I don't want your guilt money, Ryan said, his voice hard, pulling away from her touch. I don't want to be your charity case or your redemption project or the way you ease your conscience about your father's sins. And I sure as hell don't want to be the janitor who got lucky because the boss felt sorry for him and decided to assuage her white liberal guilt. That's not what this is, isn't it? He pressed the elevator button, the bell dinging softly in the heavy silence. You found out who I am, where I come from, what your father did to my family, and suddenly you want to make everything better. You want to hand me $500 million so you can sleep at night. But you can't just buy away the past, Celeste. You can't purchase forgiveness or friendship or trust or anything real. I learned that the hard way from your father. He thought he could buy my mother's silence, buy our compliance, buy our forgetting. And maybe it worked on her. She was desperate and had no choice. But it doesn't work on me. I don't want your money. I don't want your pity. I just want... He stopped, his voice breaking. The elevator chimed. The doors opened, revealing the empty car, waiting to take him back down to his real life, away from this penthouse fantasy. What? Celeste asked softly, her heart breaking. What do you want, Ryan? He looked at her, and in his eyes she saw the 8-year-old girl and the 12-year-old boy who had promised to be friends forever. She saw the years of separation and silence. She saw the damage her father had done, the casual cruelty of the powerful toward the powerless. She saw her own complicity in that system, even if she'd been too young to understand it at the time. I want to go back to that summer when we were kids, he said quietly. Before your father changed. Before my mother lost everything. Before we learned that money and class could destroy anything, even friendship. But I can't. We can't. That's not how time works. Then let's start over, she said, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her face. Not as CEO and janitor. Not as Davenport and Walker. Not as rich and poor. Just as Celeste and Ryan. 2 people who used to be friends. 2 people who could be friends again. Maybe more than friends if we're brave enough. I'm not that brave, he admitted. I've been hurt too many times. Betrayed too many times. I can't. The offer stands, she interrupted firmly, her business voice returning, giving her strength when everything else felt like it was crumbling. 50% of the Melbrock. No strings attached. Whether you kiss me or not, whether you forgive me or not, whether we ever speak again or not, I'm putting it in writing tomorrow. The partnership documents will be filed by close of business. You earned it. Your mother earned it. And I won't let my father's mistakes define my life or my legacy. You can accept it or reject it. That's your choice. But I'm doing it regardless of what you decide about us. Ryan looked at her from inside the elevator, his expression unreadable, a storm of emotions playing across his features. Anger, grief, longing, fear, hope, all tangled together in a knot that seemed impossible to unravel. You really are crazy, he said softly. So everyone keeps telling me. She managed a weak smile through her tears. Happy New Year, Ryan Walker. Happy New Year, Celeste Davenport. The doors started to close and she saw him lift his hand in a small wave, a gesture so familiar it brought back a flood of memories, waving goodbye at the end of each summer, promising to write, promising to stay friends, promises that had been broken by forces beyond their control. For what it's worth, I wish things were different. I wish we were different people living in a different world, but we're not. Maybe we could be, she called out as the doors sealed shut, her voice echoing in the empty penthouse. Maybe we already are. She stood alone in her 14,000-square-foot apartment, surrounded by luxury that suddenly felt obscene, drowning in loneliness that money couldn't touch, with the taste of rejection bitter on her tongue and the weight of her father's sins heavy on her shoulders. Outside, fireworks continued to explode over Central Park, celebrating new beginnings she wasn't sure she'd ever get to have. The grandfather clock struck 12:15 a.m. Somewhere in the city, Ryan Walker was riding his blue Harley-Davidson through the snowy streets, carrying with him the ghost of a promise made by a dead man and a forgotten friendship that had somehow found its way back after 16 years. Celeste walked to the windows, pressing her forehead against the cold glass. The city stretched out before her. 8 million people, 8 million stories, 8 million chances for connection that most people never took. She'd been one of those people, safe in her tower, protected by money, insulated from real human contact, but not anymore. She pulled out her phone and texted her lawyer. Need partnership documents finalized ASAP. We'll send details in the morning. 50-50 split. Ryan Walker. No negotiation. The response came back within seconds. Celeste, it's New Year's Eve. This can wait. She typed back. No, it can't. Some things are 16 years overdue. Then she walked to the kitchen and started cleaning up the dinner dishes, something she normally left for the staff. But tonight felt different. Tonight, doing the work herself felt like honoring something. Honoring Ryan's dignity. Honoring the boy who'd become a man while she'd forgotten he existed. Honoring the possibility that maybe, just maybe, some mistakes could be corrected. As she washed each plate, each fork, each glass that had held wine and possibility, she made a promise of her own. She would make this right, not for her conscience or her father's legacy or some abstract notion of justice, but because Ryan Walker deserved better than what life had given him, because their friendship, their connection, deserved a second chance, and because, despite everything, despite the hurt and the years and the impossible gulf between their worlds, she was falling for him, for the way he looked at the world with honest eyes, for the way he took pride in work others dismissed, for the way he'd said no to her when yes would have been easier, for the stubborn integrity that wouldn't let him take what he hadn't earned. Whether he was ready to catch her or not, she was falling, and for the first time in 3 years, since her father's death, since her divorce, since she'd locked herself away in this golden prison, falling didn't scare her. It felt like flying. He rode his blue Harley through the snowy streets of Manhattan, the cold biting through his jacket, the road slick and treacherous. He should have been careful, should have been focused, but all he could think about was Celeste's face when he'd walked away, the hurt in her eyes, the desperation in her voice, the impossible offer she'd made, 50% of the Mel Brock Hotel, billions of dollars, his mother's vindication, justice 16 years late, and all he'd had to do was stay, kiss her, let himself believe that maybe, just maybe, someone like her could actually care about someone like him. But he'd learned that lesson already, learned it with Jennifer, who'd loved the idea of him until reality set in, learned it with every rich family his mother had worked for, who'd treated her like furniture until they didn't need her anymore, learned it from Thomas Davenport himself, who'd given a 12-year-old boy a motorcycle and then destroyed his family without a second thought. People with money didn't change. They just got better at hiding what they really were. He pulled into a 24-hour diner in Queens, the kind of place that smelled like grease and regret, and served coffee strong enough to strip paint. The waitress, 60s, tired eyes, name tag that said Gloria, poured him a cup without asking. "Rough night?" she asked. "You could say that." "Woman trouble?" Ryan laughed, bitter and sharp. "Is it that obvious?" "Honey, I've been working this shift for 23 years. I can spot woman trouble from across the room. You got that look, like someone just offered you everything you ever wanted, and you were stupid enough to walk away from it." The accuracy of that statement hit him like a punch to the gut. Something like that. Gloria refilled his cup even though he hadn't touched the first one. "Let me give you some free advice since you look like you need it. Whatever she did, whatever she said, whatever impossible thing is standing between you two, ask yourself one question. 10 years from now, when you're sitting alone in some apartment wondering what if, are you going to regret walking away? Because if the answer is yes, then you're being an idiot right now. It's complicated. It's always complicated. That's what makes it worth it." She walked away to tend to other customers, leaving Ryan alone with his coffee and his thoughts. He pulled out his phone. 3 missed calls from a number he didn't recognize. A text from the hotel's day manager. "Everything okay? Ms. Davenport requested you be given the week off with pay. Should I be concerned?" Then another text, this one from an unknown number. "This is Margaret Chen, Ms. Davenport's attorney. She's requested I contact you regarding partnership documents. Please call at your earliest convenience." Ryan stared at the messages. She'd actually done it. Actually started the process of signing over half her empire to the janitor who'd rejected her on New Year's Eve. It was insane. It was reckless. It was the most honest thing anyone had ever done for him. His phone buzzed again. Another text from Celeste's lawyer. "For what it's worth, I advised against this. She told me some things aren't about good business sense. They're about doing what's right. I think you should at least hear her out." Ryan sat in that diner for 3 hours, drinking coffee and wrestling with himself, with his pride, with his fear, with the ghost of his 12-year-old self who'd believed in promises and friendship, and the idea that good people existed. Finally, at 3:47 a.m., he made a decision. Celeste was still awake when her phone rang at 4:15 a.m. She'd been sitting in her study, going through old photo albums she'd found in storage, pictures of that Hampton estate, pictures of a blonde little girl and a dark-haired boy building sandcastles, pictures of her father, before the cancer, before the obsession with building his empire, when he'd still known how to smile. "Hello?" Her voice was hoarse from crying. "It's Ryan." Her heart stopped. "Ryan, I didn't think you'd call. I've been thinking about what you said, about the partnership, about second chances." He paused and she could hear traffic in the background. "I need to know something, and I need you to be completely honest with me, even if the answer isn't what I want to hear. Anything. If I was still just the janitor. If there was no partnership offer, no shared history, no guilt about your father, would you still want this? Would you still want me?" Celeste didn't hesitate. "Yes. 1,000 times yes. I started watching you 6 months ago, Ryan. 6 months before I knew who you were, before I remembered our past. I fell for you based on nothing but watching you work, the dignity you brought to it, the quiet pride, the way you hummed blues songs and straightened paintings that weren't your responsibility. I fell for the man you are now, not the boy you were. The shared history just makes it more complicated, but it doesn't make my feelings less real." Silence then. "I'm downstairs in the lobby. I know it's 4 a.m. and this is crazy, but can I come up? We need to talk. Really talk." "Yes. God, yes. I'm buzzing you up now." 5 minutes later, Ryan stepped out of the elevator into her penthouse. He looked exhausted, his eyes red-rimmed, his clothes rumpled. But there was something different in his expression, something that looked like hope. "I've spent my whole life being told I wasn't good enough," he said without preamble. "Not rich enough, not educated enough, not ambitious enough. My ex-wife made me feel like I was some kind of charity case. Your father made my mother feel disposable. The world has spent 28 years teaching me that people like me don't get happy endings with people like you. Ryan," he held up a hand. "Let me finish. Please. I need to say this while I still have the courage." He took a deep breath. "But then I met Gloria. She's a waitress at a diner in Queens. Been working the night shift for 23 years. And she told me that 10 years from now I'm going to regret walking away from you. That I'm being an idiot for letting fear make my decisions. And she's right." He walked closer. Close enough that she could see the exhaustion in his eyes, but also the determination. "I don't want your guilt money. I don't want a partnership because you're trying to make up for your father's sins. But if you're offering it because you genuinely believe I deserve it, because you see value in what I bring to the table beyond just being someone you used to know, then maybe I'm the idiot for refusing. I do see that value, Celeste said firmly. I see a man who rebuilt a motorcycle from scrap metal, who takes pride in his work even when no one's watching, who reads Steinbeck and listens to B.B. King, who has more integrity in his little finger than most CEOs have in their entire bodies. You think you're not good enough for this? Ryan, I'm the one who's not good enough for you. That's not true. It is. You work 3 jobs and never complain. I inherited billions and spend most of my time feeling sorry for myself. You create beauty in everything you touch. I just exist, trying not to screw up what my father built. You're real, Ryan. You're genuine. And that's rarer than any amount of money. He was standing right in front of her now, close enough that she could smell the coffee on his breath and the leather of his jacket. What do you want from me, Celeste? Really want? I want a chance, she whispered. A real one. To know you. To let you know me. To see if what I feel is real or if I'm just lonely and desperate. I want to earn your trust even if it takes years. I want to prove that I'm not my father, that I can be better, that we can be better, together. And the partnership? That's separate. That's justice. That's what should have happened 16 years ago. Whether you kiss me or not, whether we work out or crash and burn, you're getting those papers. You earned them. Your mother earned them. And I won't let you refuse them out of pride. Ryan smiled. A real smile this time, warm and genuine. You're incredibly stubborn, you know that? I'm a Davenport, stubborn is in the DNA. Good. He reached up, cupping her face with both hands. His palms were rough from work, warm against her skin. Because I'm about to do something incredibly stupid and I need you to be stubborn enough to stick with me when reality gets messy. When your friends judge you. When the media has a field day with the CEO dating the janitor. When we fight about stupid things and question whether this was all a mistake. Can you do that? Can you be stubborn enough to choose me even when it's hard? Yes, she breathed. Can you? I can try. And then finally, he kissed her. It wasn't like the movies, it wasn't perfect or practiced or smooth. It was desperate and honest and a little bit messy. It tasted like coffee and tears and new beginnings. It felt like coming home after years of being lost. When they pulled apart, both breathing hard, Celeste started laughing. You know what's funny? What? If you'd said yes to the kiss earlier, before the big revelation, this would have been so much simpler. Ryan grinned. Yeah, but then we wouldn't have had the dramatic reconciliation. And what's a good love story without drama? Fair point. She rested her forehead against his. So what happens now? Now I have to learn how to be a hotel partner. Figure out what the hell I'm doing. Try not to screw up billions of dollars worth of real estate. You'll be great at it. You see things I don't. You understand this building in a way I never could. You know every corner of it, every pipe, every system. That's valuable. And us? He pulled back slightly to look at her. What about us? We take it slow. We figure it out as we go. We make mistakes and fix them. We introduce each other to our worlds and hope they don't collide too badly. Hello, my friend? He interrupted softly, echoing her words from earlier. How was your day today? Is everything okay? She laughed through fresh tears. My day was terrifying and wonderful and completely insane. But yeah, everything's okay. Better than okay. They stood there in her penthouse as the sun started to rise over Central Park, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Outside, New Year's Day was beginning. Inside, 2 people who'd lost each other 16 years ago were finding each other again. Ryan's blue Harley was parked in its usual spot, waiting. But this time, it wasn't a ghost of a broken promise. It was a bridge between past and future, a reminder that some things, some connections, survive even when everything else falls apart. You know what I was thinking? Celeste said, watching the sunrise. What? That Harley has 2 seats. Maybe sometime, when the roads are clear and the weather's better, you could take me for a ride. Show me those back roads to the Adirondacks, the diners where everyone knows your name, the lake so clear you can see straight to the bottom. Ryan kissed her forehead. I'd like that, but fair warning. Riding with me means eating at greasy diners, sleeping in cheap motels, and getting bugs in your teeth. Sounds perfect. And it did. Because after years of luxury that left her empty, Celeste was finally learning what her grandmother had tried to teach her all along, that real richness had nothing to do with money. It was about connection, about authenticity, about finding someone who saw you, really saw you and chose to stay anyway. As the city woke up around them, Celeste Davenport and Ryan Walker stood together, watching the first day of the new year unfold. They had a lot to figure out, legal documents to finalize, worlds to bridge, skeptics to prove wrong. But for the first time in a long time, neither of them felt alone. They had each other. And they had a blue Harley-Davidson that represented both a broken promise and a new beginning. Sometimes that's all you need to start over. Sometimes that's everything.